Hi, it's Neil Sean here on your entertainment news. I'm with one of my all-time favourite legends. I've waited so long to meet him. It's the one and only, the very gorgeous girls, Mr. Mark Wynter. Remember though, Mark?
If you miss it, you miss out.
Don't miss Mark today on your entertainment news.
She's Venus in blue jeans, Mona Lisa with a ponytail. She's a walking, talking work of art. She's the girl who stole my heart.
Mark, lovely to meet you finally, and thank you for being my guest today. On the table, we've got this fabulous album that you brought in, and I was just saying to you in the green room, I can't believe how many tracks you've recorded. And we were sort of saying how quickly you did them and all that sort of stuff. So tell me, first of all, how did the album come around? When they approached you, did you think, did I really do all of those tracks? Or was it a shock to you?
The album came about because there's a company, Cherry Red, who put out compilations of people who have had hit records in the past and have a back catalogue. And my manager, Graham, got in touch with them to see if they'd be interested. And they said, well, does Mark have any other tracks apart from the ones that we know have been out on some compilations already? Yeah. And as it happened, I had about 20 other tracks of acetates and other things that some of them I'd recorded at Pi Records, which was my last record company. And then Pi went down the tubes and they were never issued, but I had the acetates.
Wow, that's good though, isn't it?
And they're good tracks, and I'd kept them all these years, many years. And also, I have things, I had a couple of videos of some work I did in Australia. I had my own television spectacular there. So there were several songs on that, including a couple of duets, one with Patsy Ann Noble, and one from over here on television on the Mike and Bernie Wynter show with Kathy Kirby. So there was a whole mixture of stuff that could be added to this compilation coming out. And so we discussed what was to come out, and we ended up with 95 tracks on 3 CDs, a 3 CD set, including 20 tracks that have never been issued before.
So, but when you see, I love the fact that you've kept them, because as you rightly said, if you went back now to their archives, they might not have them, somebody's lost them,
they'd be
broken
gone.
them, whatever, you know. So did you, in your mind, was it just the fact that you thought, oh, well, I'll keep these because you never know, or was it just the fact that you'd recorded them, well, I'm having them?
It was really the fact that I didn't see past the point of the fact that I had them, and it's one of the things about being a recording artist, I think, and a film actor, is you have something tangible. Whereas when you work in the theatre, which I do mostly now, if you're lucky enough to get a couple of good reviews, that is proof of what you've done. That's tangibility. Yeah. But other than that, a record or a film is a greater proof of what you've done, and hopefully it's good or acceptable and being reviewed well, and you have that for life. So yes, the answer is that I had these tracks, I had this stuff on video and DVD, some of it's been transferred to DVD, a couple of films I made and so on, and it's wonderful because that has made up my life. Yeah. And when I think back really to the time I started, when I was 17, and I said to you, I trotted along here to Decca Records when I was along here at the Embankment, and made my first audition and got my first record contract. I find it very hard to believe now that I've actually been in this profession for 57 years.
Well, you don't look a day older. Stop it.
I say to myself, well, have I really been treading the boards for 57 years? I mean, it's extraordinary.
Because I love the fact that as well, we were talking about how, in a way, your access to people, to get a career going then. I mean, you were saying you were in the office and Lionel Bart just happened to be there. I mean, a huge name, even at that time. So the fact that he saw you and said, oh, well, go and see this guy, you wouldn't have those connections if you were starting.
But a lot of it is being in the right place at the right time, isn't it? That's one of the things. And yes, singing for a music publisher, auditioning, hoping to get taken on as a demo singer, which was what I was doing. And Lionel Bart being in the outer office. And then he popped his head around and said, have you got a recording contract? And I said, no, I haven't. Of course, Oliver was going then. Things Ain't What They Used to Be had been a big success, and I'd seen both of them. And he said, well, and he gave me a contact to get in touch with my manager to get in touch with Frank Lee here at Decca Records, who was the head of A&R. But I mean, today you wouldn't be able to just telephone somebody and say, as my manager did, and say, I have an artist I think you'd be interested in. Would you give him an audition? No.
Wouldn't get in the door.
They wouldn't even speak to you on the phone. I mean, you'd have so many Fort Knox people to get through before. I mean, nowadays, the classic phrase is, if you do get through to somebody, they say, would you bear with me?
Yeah.
I always want to say, certainly. What would you like me to take off first? We have all these,
Good phrase,
we have all these phrases there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not at my desk. I've just stepped away from my desk.
Yeah.
Your call is important to us.
Oh.
Before you can actually ever get to anybody, and half the time you can't get to them anyway.
Now, I'm going to ask you, when you first got your first record out, I'm always intrigued by this, and you've got the the vinyl and everything like that, and you put it out. How thrilled were you, and did you go into a shop and look at it and stuff like that? Because I think people are so bashful. I think, I'd be like a shot looking at it.
Absolutely thrilled to bits, because I had a handful of 45 RPMs, and my first the first artist that really knocked me out was Bobby Darin.
Oh yeah.
With Splish Splash and Lazy River, Mac the Knife. Because I'm quite a jazz fan as well. I love jazz music as well. I'm quite eclectic. I like classical music. I was taken to classical concerts by the headmaster, who was head of music at my junior school, along at the Royal Festival Hall here when I was about 10, with a group of other children. So the apertures within me musically were opened up quite early with classical music, and I used to come up here to the Kilburn State in Kilburn High Road and see jazz people like the MJQ. When I was about 14, I used to come up west, which was quite a big deal. So I've had I have quite a span of appreciation of all kinds of music, and I mean, yes. Hearing your first record on the radio, I think, was the real buzz.
Yeah.
The first time I heard my very first record, which was on Decca, as I say, Image of a Girl, played on the radio, that was really something.
Well, stop your breath for a minute.
Well, it did, because I had this handful of singles of my own, but then that I bought. But then to have your own single and see your name on the label, and at the time that record came out, I was doing. I'd auditioned for a summer season at Bournemouth as well. And I think I got it on the strength of the fact that I had a record coming out. Wow. But on the bill, it was on the pier at Bournemouth, on the bill, my name wasn't on it. It said, introducing the new Musical Express Discovery. It didn't say my name.
Oh, God, that must be so annoying.
And the record came out, and it was actually panned on Jukebox Jury. Arthur Askey and various other people, whom I worked with subsequently. He was a great old guy, but they all said, no, I don't think it's going to be a hit. Well, it was. It went to number 11, which was great. And I was staying in digs at Bournemouth, in Westover Road, 10 and 6 a night. Same breakfast every morning, bacon and beans. That was my beginning. And I was earning 15 quid a week.
It was not bad.
It was great. Yeah. So
I love the fact that you mentioned Arthur Askey as well, because it would be surreal now to have a show like that and have a comic of his age criticising the 17-year-old
on the
boy's
panel.
song.
On the panel,
like
yeah.
X Factor or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wow,
But yeah, it is a thrill. But I think my first real thrill, first of all, it was obviously getting a contract, but you don't know what will happen after that.
Yeah.
But going to the Decca Studios, which were in West End Lane, over the other side of London there, and walking in, and all the musicians were in the studio. I know things aren't done like that now, but the whole orchestra.
Were you nervous though, Mark? Because it is.
Yeah, I guess I was a bit nervous.
It falls on you, doesn't it? You know, I mean, they can just carry on playing the ring, but if you can't do it, you know.
But when I heard it back through the big speakers in the studio, of course, that was a thrill for a start. And in fact, when I did this audition here at Decca, the A&R guy, Frank Lee, said, we've got a song, he said, which is a big hit in America, and I think it's a group hit in America, but we think it would make a solo hit over here, which was Image of a Girl. And he said, but we need something to the other side. But nowadays, somebody would rush off and write their own song. He said, what else do you know that we could put on the B-side? And I don't know why, but I immediately said, oh, well, I think I know the lyrics of The Glory of Love. And he had a pianist there in his office. So he trotted it through, we sorted out the keys, that's it, we'll do that. And that became the B-side.
Is that quick?
It all seems so simple.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's, as you say, it takes months to make a record.
Yeah.
And if there's another track to be recorded, it would be like, well, can I go and write something?
But you say it's like the folly of youth, though, isn't it? You go in and you're really you're kind of so happy to be doing it, aren't you?
Thrilled.
I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, because I must say, my sort of direction was not, I want to be a recording artist because I want to make loads of money. It really wasn't. It really wasn't. And I think if it was, I'd be, in a more fixed position today than I am. Although I'm not complaining. But the essence really was that from the time I was about 12, having been a lead choir boy in a parish church, I wanted to sing for a living. I mean, singing is very spiritual, as you know. It's very spiritual, and it's, you know, it just makes you feel great. I mean, in fact, if I'm feeling a bit down, as we all get sometimes, I go and sit at the piano and I sing a few scales and a few songs, sing along a few records, or, you know, dare I say, if something comes on the radio in the car, I sing along to it, unless my children are in the car, and then they say, "Dad, oh, please don't sing. We can't hear the iPods."
Yeah.
You know? So but I think it's something that I wanted to be a singer.
Yeah.
That was it, and I pursued it before I was auditioning for the music publisher where Lionel Bart was there. I used to come up and I auditioned for a couple of clubs when I was 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
which
you had
was
to drive then?
which was silly, really, because who would employ a 15-year-old kid?
But you don't care when you're 15,
I was so
do you?
innocent about everything, and going along with a sheet music copy of Great Balls of Fire. I mean, how ludicrous. Into some club, you know, near the Windmill Theatre in Soho. And of course I never got the jobs, but I thought, and I used to buy the stage, and I used to come up to the West End, and I used to lie on the pavement outside the Two Eyes coffee bar. You know, they had a kind of a chicken wire thing where you could see down into the cellar. And they'd have people on, like they had Cliff on in the shadows. Yeah. But from where that vantage point, you could only actually see from the waist downwards. Yeah. You couldn't see the top of their body. So I could hear them, but I couldn't actually see them all performing.
What a lovely memory as well, because it just proves how much you loved it.
Yeah.
Because you wanted to just soak up the atmosphere.
I wanted to be a part of it, I did, yeah. So I was very lucky.
You mentioned one lady who I always thought was brilliant. You said you did a duet with Kathy Kirby. I met her very briefly once a few years ago, but it's hard now I'm amazed really how she's not remembered as much, because she was huge, wasn't she? You know, like the Madonna, if you like, of that period. You know.
I did a short TV series with her, actually, which with Joe Henderson, Mr. Joe Piano Henderson, and I don't know what's happened to it, and it's disappeared from the archives because we've tried to trace it, and we went around factories and we sang in factories. Soon after I'd started, I was 17, and we did that. I think it was for about 8 weeks. But all that's gone now, which is a pity, you know, that it wasn't kept in archives.
But she was very glamorous, wasn't she?
Incredibly. Oh, she was. Well, she was known as the sort of English version of Marilyn Monroe, really, wasn't she, at the time, with the glossy lips and everything? Yeah. But I always thought that Kathy was rather fractious. You know, she was of a nervous, fractious disposition, and I think because she didn't have a particularly happy private life, I think in the end it caused her to become reclusive, didn't it? She became a recluse. She did become a recluse.
Yeah, sad, isn't it? Because the actual talent, you know, that's what impresses me with, you know, people of your generation, is that, you know, I like the fact that when you listen to your recordings, for instance, there's no trickery. It's just you. And it's nice that.
Well, I believe how she got started was I think she came from Ilford, or she was living in Ilford, of Irish descent originally. Her family, I believe, but. She went to see the Bert Ambrose, who became her manager. I'm not sure if they ever married, but anyway, she was 15 apparently, and she went to Bert Ambrose where he was appearing. I think it was the Ilford Palais, whatever that venue is there, and asked if she could sing with the band, with the orchestra. And she was a kid. She was 15, and she got up and sang, and he thought, wow, this voice, incredible. And he then decided to kind of take her on and be her mentor, you know.
It's lovely.
Yeah, but just a sad ending, you know. Yeah. But I think it's hard to define it. But if you are lucky enough to have a happy personal life and a successful professional life in show business, probably also in other areas, politics or whatever as well, I think you're very lucky, because quite often it's a case of one or the other.
Yeah, and there's the great ups and downs of anybody's career, isn't it? It can be great, and then it goes down a bit, and can go down even more.
Well, it certainly does if you're a singer and an actor, because you know you have times. I mean, I've had a couple of rough times. In fact, I played that was my favourite role in a musical, Barnum, P.T. Barnum, the world's greatest showman. I did it in South Africa at the Johannesburg Civic Theatre, and it was a huge success. And then I was asked to do it again, believe it or not, on a ship 2 years later on the SS Norway.
Could be tricky on the wire.
Well, you can do it because these big ships have stabilizers. And I was asked to take over from this American guy who had to fly back to New York for personal reasons, and so I did it twice, and I absolutely loved that show, you know. But when you're doing a musical like that, it disciplines you, and it makes you appreciate so much that you're working. But after I did that musical, the first time around, having scored hugely with it. I came back and I couldn't get arrested. I had 8 months, couldn't get a job.
Yeah.
Could not get a job. And I said to my agent, who was a lovely guy, was my agent for 29 years, and I miss him enormously. He was terrific, a man called Ian Bevan. And I said, can't you get me some tiny thing, a bit of radio? He said, Mark, you've been playing leads in the West End and on tour. He said, there's no way that people would employ you in a secondary role. And he said, I cannot make people employ you.
And that's true, actually. Yeah.
People want to or they don't.
Yeah.
He said,
yeah.
I said, but I really feel, and this was 1984.
Yeah.
And I said, I really feel perhaps this is the end of the road. He said, no, it isn't.
No,
it
always comes
said, you're
around.
now too experienced.
Yeah.
And he said, you have a degree of profile. He said, but just be patient. And he was right. By the end of the year, things kicked off again, which is great.
As I say, I was reading your brilliant bio, and you've done so many things. You yourself, when you were putting that together, must have forgotten certain bits, because there was this great thing where you were on one of the big shows at the time, Val Parnell's Star Time, which is huge. I mean, it's hard to imagine that.
Jimmy
now,
Jewell and Ben Warris.
Yeah, but I mean, just as you say, the artists around you as well. Did you learn a lot from these people because you're there and soaking it in?
I think I learned an awful lot, especially about timing, because I've been in quite a few comedies. I mean, people think I'm a very serious fellow, but I've done quite a lot of comedies. And I think I did learn a lot from all those comics I worked with from way back. You say Arthur Asker, worked with twice in pantomime, Frankie Howard, Dick Emery.
I love Dick Emery. What was he like, though? What was he like?
Dick Emery was brilliant because of what he did. I did a season with him at Bournemouth, and it was a fantastic sellout season for 16 weeks, sold out twice nightly, completely sold out. But I think Dick had his, as we all have insecurities, let's face it, none of us are perfect, but he had his insecurities, and he said to me one day, he said, can you water ski? I said, yeah, I can actually. He said, do you want to come water skiing? I said, yeah, I'd love to, because he had his boat. Dick had all the toys.
Yeah.
He had a boat with a broom hull, I think it's called, and the Harley Davidson, and he bought his wife an E-Type Jaguar, which was very generous of him, and he had another big vehicle himself. Let's face it, he was big news. He was a big star, wasn't he?
Yeah, massive.
And marvelous on stage, very funny, and could sing very, very well too. Could sing very well. Anyway, I said yes, I can. So. I agreed to meet him with some of the girls from the show, one of whom became my wife subsequently, actually.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, which was good. And we went out in his boat, and he said, okay, he said, off you go. So I skied around, and then I said, okay, your turn. He said, no, I can't ski. He had all the gear. He had this small boat, the skis, the big boat, couldn't ski. I said, you can't water ski. I said, well, why do you? He said, well, I just thought you'd like a day out, which was very nice of him. He said, to tell you the truth, he said, I can't even swim. I said, really? And he had the two boats.
Yeah.
I said, I've taught some people to swim. Would you like me to teach you to swim? He said, would you? I said, yeah, sure. So we arranged with a local swimming pool to open up a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Which was quite something, given that it was a summer season in Bournemouth.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people, a lot of demand for the
As you say,
for the swimming pools. Yeah.
Holiday makers, senior twice.
Anyway,
nightly,
to cut it short, after about 4 lessons, he gave up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's the only person.
Couldn't do it, though. Could he
couldn't do
master
it.
No.
He's the only person I know who could hold a kickboard in front of him. Instead of going forwards, he went backwards. Don't ask me why.
Does sound like me a little bit when I was.
But he kind of lost patience. He said, I can't do this. And he gave up. He said, no, forget that. Won't do that anymore.
You mentioned Frankie Howard as well. Funnily enough, I've just been invited to a sort of a drama about him, a play, and it must be strange, really, because when you see things like that yourself, you having worked with them and know them. I mean, I met him a couple of times, but very briefly. But what were your memories of him? Because he's always seemed I was very young. He seemed quite troubled to me.
Oh, I think he was a trouble, but I think it was part of his appeal, wasn't it? That he looked a little bit stressed, I
was a bit,
a little bit
like the world on his shoulders.
A little bit, yeah. And he'd certainly had his ups and downs, as you know. I mean, it was through appearing at the Establishment, wasn't it? That club that Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, Peter Cook particularly, was running and put him on there, and kind of brought him up again into the public domain, as it were. Whereas he kind of slipped away quite a lot. Because I remember reading about him when I was a newspaper boy on a comic called The Radio Fun.
Oh, yes.
All those people, Arthur Asky, Frankie, they were in this comic. So it was extraordinary for me now as an adult to be working with them.
That's what I mean.
It was quite. Mate, when I don't often sit there and think, oh yeah, I worked with that. Yeah, I remember reading about him on the front page of the Radio Fund. But when I think about it now and I talk about it as I am with you, which is not very often, but I think, God, that really was quite something. Frankie, yes, I think he was troubled, and I think he had his insecurities, but he was a hell of a character, of course.
Yeah.
I did this pantomime with him at the Palladium, Jack and the Beanstalk, and don't ask me why, but when we first started the run, he used to come to my dressing room practically every night, certainly 3 or 4 times a week, and ask if he could borrow my makeup. What's all that about? I thought, I said, Frankie, can't you buy your own makeup? He just wanted a bit of company to chat, really. I think, really, you know. Yeah. But he was good. He was good fun. You had to be on your toes because he would do things that were unpredictable on stage. You know, he'd forget the script and go off and start talking to her. He'd say, "Mrs., what about you, Mrs.? Yeah, well, come on, you know, show us your titters and all that." You know, no, don't. No, don't. You'll shock the audience. Yeah. You know, he was a hell of a character.
And you're young. I don't know if this really, but you're very young, so you're learning, aren't you? Standing next
all
to
the
them,
time,
thinking, "Oh, I see. This is."
So that's what, as we started out saying, working with all these people. In fact, working with Frankie in that, although I played some comedy in rep. I'd done quite a lot of rep before that particular production at the Palladium with Frankie, and that was a long one. You can't believe it now that it ran until the beginning of March.
Yeah.
The pantomime from the second week of December, and it was extended. It ran till the end of the first week of March. I mean, extraordinary.
Summer holidays.
Fantastic. I mean, in that theatre, which is over 2,000 seater, you know, we did phenomenal business. It was wonderful. It was probably one of the last of the really big production pantomimes. It was a really wonderful pantomime. But after that I did a comedy which came about through working with Frankie in that show, because there was a thing that happened which was accidental at first, and I know it sounds like a corny old cheesy old gag, but Jack and the Beanstalk, the cow's udders fell off. So of course Frankie made great capital out of that and put his hand up the cow's inside and all that nonsense, you know. And I had lived with him on it, you know, and I said things like, Frankie, you know, if you keep ad-libbing like this, you're putting me off. He said, I'll put you off, I'll throw you off into that bloody pit if you're not careful. You know, he was marvellous. But from that, and I didn't know at the time, after that finished, I was offered a tour of a Noel Coward play called Present Laughter. Oh, yeah. Playing a wonderful role of Roland Mall, who is the would-be eccentric young author, a part originally created by Richard Briers many years before.
Oh, yeah, lovely Richard.
It's a wonderful part. Yeah. And it was a national tour of 12 weeks. It was hugely successful, extended by a further 6. And I played the part of Roland Mall, very eccentric. I grew a beard and cut chunks out of it. And I played him as a young student who was trying to knit a scarf, but also he was vegetarian, always eating carrots. I don't know if you know the play, do you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
it's a great play.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Yeah.
And Gary Essendine, who's the main character, was played by that wonderful actor Peter Wingard, who
Jason King.
I'm so sorry he's not on the scene anymore as an actor, because he was terrific. Yeah. And he directed it, and he was very, very good. And of course, Gary Essendine, the character, is besieged by this young author who keeps wanting him to read his would-be plays that are all dreadful. but every time but he's rather shy as well, so every time he comes in and shakes hands with Gary Essendine, he pulls his hand down practically to the floor, but he looks away as he's doing it. When he says, "I'm very pleased to meet you, Mr. Moore," and he goes, "I'm pleased to meet you," does that. So it was a comedy gag, so the other person's practically fallen to the floor. So it's a running gag. Yeah. And it was hugely successful. And I said to the impresario, quite some weeks into the run, when he came, it was Duncan Weldon, I said, I'm delighted to be playing this part, Duncan. I said, but what made you think of me in this role? Because it was so unlike anything I'd done before, you know. Yeah. Although, as I say, I played bits of comedy and rep. And he said, I saw you at the Palladium with Frankie, he said, and you had that marvellous ad-lib scene with the cow, which became a stock item.
It's a showstopper almost, isn't it, then?
It was. It was a showstopper, it was. He said, the timing and the rapport and everything was marvellous, and I thought you'd probably be very good in comedy. Wow. So that's nice, isn't it? Well, that's what I mean. It goes back to, you know, being in the right place at the right time, somebody seeing you, as well as thinking you can do the job, of course. Yeah. So it's a combination of things, but, you know, there is a lot of luck in it. Absolutely. But if you've had some experience and if you work at your craft, as I'm sure you have, well, you know, and if we all are lucky enough to get opportunities, then you study what you're doing. Yeah. So I used to watch all these comics, stand in the wings and watch them, and listen to their timing, and it's the same with singers. You know, you listen to a singer, you listen to their phrasing, their breathing.
Absolutely.
You know, you don't just get up there and open up.
Well, you made me think of two people who you worked with, and it's a very famous poster in Blackpool with Eric and Ernie. And I remember seeing you, you were in an exhibition a couple of years ago, actually, and you were pictured on a dodgem in Blackpool in 1965.
Was I? Well, that's...
And you kind of look a bit depressed, to be honest, Mark, on this dodgem. But when you mentioned
it's because I kept bashing into people.
When you mentioned it, I was thinking about Ernie's dreadful plays, what I wrote, you know, because the character you played in Present Laughter is this, whatever. I mean, they were, again, I only make Eric very briefly, and you Ernie a little bit, but again, you're a young boy, you're in a massive, successful show, brilliant new theatre in the heart of Blackpool at the time. What did you take from that then when you were there with that for that period? I mean, it must have been great with that.
It was fantastic. I mean, again, it was another absolute sellout season, Yeah, you're right, you didn't see much of Ernie, but you saw Eric quite a lot, and he was very chatty, and I went out to lunch with him and Tommy Cooper, and it was such an experience, and actually such a privilege for a young person like myself to be invited to mix with these people, and to learn from them and to chat to them and enjoy their I wouldn't say friendship, because they were older than me, but their camaraderie and the way that they operated as performers.
They let you in as well.
They let me in.
Yeah,
they let me in, which was great. And of course, there is always a case of if you're the new boy on the block, you're new blood, as it were, But on the other hand, you might be a real wet week, and they think, well, God, that was a waste of time inviting him, What a boring old, sound. Yeah. Anyway, so, I learned so much from them, and, it was, in fact, I had lunch with Eric. I was up near Stockton-on-Tees, and he and Ernie were playing, I think it was whatever the club was in Stockton-on-Tees, nearby, and Eric and I, not Ernie, were staying at the same hotel, and I had lunch with him not long before he sadly left us, which was quite tragic, really, and that's another
incredibly gifted, though, naturally gifted. You talk about talent, but it's like you say, you can teach talent to a point, but then there has to be a point where it comes naturally.
I think there has to be some spark, and there has to be, and also. And I'm not saying blowing a trumpet or saying this to praise myself or anybody else really, but as a singer or a comic, I think, as well, you have to get up there and do it. You have to have quite a lot of bottle.
Yes.
You do. Yeah. I mean, to get up and stand in front of an audience.
It's a lonely stage, a singer, isn't it?
It's a lonely stage, and it's even more lonely as a soloist, actually, Neil, than it is if you're in a group.
Yes.
I remember the first tours I did with all sorts of people, with Billy Fury and Marty, who I'm going on tour with again soon from October.
We've had Marty here. He was, I think, cracking bloke.
Yeah, great.
A lot of fun.
Well, I did the tour with him last year, and I hadn't been on a one-night stand tour since 1964. Yeah. But I was approached, so I did it last year. It was hugely successful.
I saw that tour.
Did you see it?
Yeah, it's really good fun.
Yeah. So
you all now look like you're really having fun.
Yeah.
I'm imagining, tell me if I'm wrong in this, but when you first did it in those package tours, in a way, you're all massive, you're all having hits, and so there's this sort of like, is he going to go better than me? Because it's natural ego thing, isn't it? When he's 21 and stuff. Yeah. When you get to in our age bracket, shall we say, you're kind of way relaxed. I mean, Martin makes a fun about singing Teenager in Love, doesn't he?
Well, that's right. Well, same with me singing Venus in Blue Jeans or Go Away Little Girl or Shy Girl,
Yeah.
But if the people want to hear them, well, why not, So
and they do. They love it. When you came on, I think what it is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you're taking them right back to a time of no mortgage, no problems, no nothing.
Exactly.
It's just they're now
simplicity.
16, 15, 17.
It was simplicity. It was a much simpler and less involved and complicated age than it is today. Yeah. But doing all those tours, I realised early on in the 60s when I was on tour with all those people, with the people we've mentioned and the Hollies and Dave Clark Five, they all had bands, they all had a group. Yeah. If you're a soloist, you are pretty much not 100%, but you're a bit Billy No Mates.
Yes.
Because the lead singer goes off with their band and all that, and so it's very hard for you to infiltrate really, because usually they've known each other from college or school or like the Kinks Art College or whatever. Yeah. So you're a bit of an outsider, and you can be on the periphery of their friendship and what they're doing, but you're quite solo. Yeah. Having said that, it's a bit like that being an actor on tour in a play, because. The women on tour in a play, they normally get together and go out for lunch and this, that, and the other, shopping. But blokes, normally don't. You
Yeah.
normally find blokes, they do their own thing in the daytime.
They find a museum or something, don't they? They do something.
Well, yeah. You can't even go to the pictures now because oftentimes in the afternoons they don't have films on unless it's holiday time, and then they're children's films. So you've got to have a bit of a schedule.
Yeah.
And I try to have a program when I'm on tour.
Oh, right.
I don't like to have an aimless day thinking the only thing I will do today is do the performance tonight.
It's a waste, isn't it? And especially if you're in somewhere that you think, I've never been in this area before, try and see something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for the last 6 years, I've been, for my sins, trying earnestly to learn the alto saxophone. so that's partly my kind of friend on tour, you know. And
that's a good idea, actually. Though.
Yeah, and
pick up a new skill.
Well, again, you can carry it with you, you know.
Yeah.
And I do like to swim a lot.
Yeah.
I love swimming.
Is that what keeps you? Because can I just say, Matt, you look very good, and you don't look. We won't say your age, but you don't look your age at all.
No, that's
but
very
you clearly look after yourself. Is that what keeps you? You swimming. You watch.
Do you know what, Neil? I think the things that I loved as a kid. I was always on my bike from the time I had a bike, from the age of 11. And I was a newspaper boy. I was always on my bike. I loved swimming. I used to swim for the school and the local area. Fortunately, I was pretty good at it. I loved having a handful of books around me. Yeah. And I loved going to the pictures. And then when I could afford it, I used to go to theatre as well. And those things have become the mainstay of what my life's all about, really. I mean, I have a family, which is great. But those are the things that, especially when I'm away on my own, those things, not all at once or not every day, but they kind of keep me together, as it were. But because to have aimless days without knowing what I was doing in the daytime, or yes, I might plan to go somewhere. I go and look at Woburn Abbey or something, and that's where you're lucky if you're on tour. Yeah. But I think you've got to, make the use of your time, because let's face it, it's pretty soon gone. Yes. As who said it? Was it George Harrison or was it Krishnamurti who said all things must pass? Which is true. And they do, I've got to quickly touch as well, because we've got so much to get through. But you're going to have to come back. You promised me you'll come back. You mentioned the films, and when I was reading about this, now I think the films that they made are the precursor, if you like, to pop videos, because you were all selling loads of records. That's what they were. You know what I mean? You club it together and you kind of string a story, but the girls are going to go and see it because they all love you, and you're singing their songs they love. They're like TV extravaganzas, I used to think. So what was that like, making your first film? Well, it was amazing, to be honest. It was Just for Fun, wasn't it? Yeah, which was a follow-up to one that the same producer, Milton Subotsky, had made the previous year with Helen Shapiro and Craig Douglas, called It's Trad Dad. Yeah. And then he followed up with Just for Fun. And of course the people that were in it, Bobby Vee, Joe Brown, Lovely Fluff, Alan Freeman, all these, David Jacobs, all these. All legends now. But you know what? The premise of that film has actually come to be true, because as you may recall, it was about young people having the vote at a younger age. Yeah, which is quite topical and now, isn't it? The person who was pressing for that, of course, was Screaming Lord Sutch. Oh, yeah. He was pressing for young people to have the vote, for loved him, for the raving loony party, But listen, he actually helped to bring that about, I think, And people thought he was a bit off his chump, but he did, and that film, which precursed all of that, that was the premise of the story, was getting the votes for young people, and I was offered what was, I suppose, laughingly called the lead these days, but it was the main person who was the thread through the story, with the girl who was my girlfriend. Who was it? Cherry Rowland, I think her name was, the actress. It's a good film, though. She wasn't an actress, actually. I think Milton Subotsky or somebody saw her standing at a bus stop. It's brilliant, isn't it? And she looked good, and she photographed well, and she became my girlfriend in the film. And Tony Hatch wrote a couple of songs for it. Yeah. I love Tony Hatch. Vote for me, see Tony. What a clever guy. I mean, a very clever man. I mean, I'm lucky enough to know him and his lovely wife Maggie, and I'm always fascinated by songwriters, Matt, that they can look at the same keys that we look at and somehow create something so magical. Well, Tony was kind of special, wasn't he? Because when I left Decca and went to Pi, and he was the blue-eyed boy of Louis Benjamin, who was the managing director of Pi Records, and Tony was their chief A&R man, and he had so much on his plate. I mean, he was recording me, he was recording and writing songs for Petula Clark, which were mega. He was recording the Searchers, I mean, and other people. He had so much on his plate. He was. Just never stopped. And I think he was in his early 20s. Yeah. And he'd only recently, I believe, come out of the army. I think he was basically a trumpeter who could play piano and also orchestrate.
Yeah.
But he had this marvellous ability to come up with tunes that were very memorable.
And even now, when you hear those intros, it's his songs, don't you? That's what I mean about the indefinable talent.
He had a mark of his own.
Yeah,
very talented.
I also have to mention, because it's coming back on TV, you were in a couple of episodes of a TV show called Sally Ann. Tell me about that.
That's right.
Because it was Southern TV, which was when all the channels...
Stephanie Cole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what a brilliant... I remember it, of course. But
I'm amazed you remember that. I don't think anybody else would.
No, because it's amazing when you see these things either come back out on DVD or they're re-shown on TV. Because when you probably made them at the time, they are in the moment, aren't they? We never thought telly was going to be so nostalgic, because it's when you look at anything now and you think, why did they wipe that? Well, nobody thought it was going to remain. So what were your memories of working on that particular show?
Not very much, actually, because I think I was only in about 2 episodes or 3 maybe. I was thrilled to get it.
Yeah.
But so I can't tell you that many memories about that particular series, actually. Equally so with another thing where I played a pilot called The Cedar Tree.
Oh, I loved The Cedar.
Yeah.
It was on in the afternoons. It was
Yeah.
a bit to me like Downton Abbey before Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1930s, wasn't it?
But the funny thing is that, again, if you're, show business, you get pigeonholed.
Yeah.
And if you kick off with something very successful in the theatre, it's very hard to be moved over and find the same success in television and film. If you get those opportunities, which I had a few of, it's marvellous. Yeah. But ostensibly, I suppose, because I started off in the theatre, I've more or less remained a theatre animal. Yeah. And I must say, I do prefer theatre because you get an instant rapport. You have to do the whole thing from A to Z from the time the curtain goes up. Yeah. If you make a mistake, it's all on your shoulders.
I think that's what keeps you lively as well, because
I think
you've got to remember every night.
It keeps the old grey matter going. Whereas, of course, with TV series, whether they're soaps or whatever, then although time is always a factor, so they don't allow that much time for error. But if it's really disastrous, and I've heard of people who don't like the take they're making, so they purposefully stop the take and say, no, stop, we can't do that. Sorry, you've got to wipe this, rather than just trying to stumble on.
Yeah.
Because then they have to do it again.
Yeah.
But it's technical, isn't it? I remember
it's all cost though now, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you do that and you see it's difficult, they might say, oh, get rid of it.
I played the lead in one of those series in Doctors, one of the Doctors and things. Playing it was a very nice part, and to demonstrate how the technicality takes over, I rehearsed this scene, learnt it verbatim to perfection. We did a rehearsal of it, and just before we were due to do a second take on it, the director said, hang on, this is not right. He said, I don't like the angles here. So they then turned the door around, which did affect what I was saying and how I came in and where I wanted to place myself in relation to the camera. But it was a last minute thing suddenly, and you had to then adapt immediately. Now, that often doesn't happen on stage. Once you've rehearsed, whether it's a musical or a play, and you do it, you're on, and it goes according to plan. Sometimes it's a little bit different. It's not always the same, because people, the age-old question is, my God, don't you get bored doing the same thing 8 times a week? Well, it's never quite the same in the theatre, because audiences are different.
Well, they give you a feedback, don't they? And
it's like a tennis match. You can tell whether it's going, whether that gets a better laugh than it did before, or no laugh at all, whatever. Yeah. But the technicality of television, if you're in a series, I saw, was that you are beholden to the technicalities. And I suppose in a film, because, as has been said, an editor can make or break a film.
Absolutely.
A good editor.
Yeah.
So television's brilliant, it's wonderful, you can be transmitted into people's homes right there. But the theatre is something else. It's a live being, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's marvellous.
It is.
I mean, you can get upset sometimes when people cough over your laugh line. You've got a punchline coming up and somebody's having a coughing fit, then you come off and you go, ah.
Well, I think that's the difference, isn't it, about when you were in, say, some seasons of Variety. If somebody did something, you could kind of break away from
You can in Variety.
Because you are Mark.
You can comment.
Yeah,
you
if
can
you're
break,
in a play.
You can break the fourth wall.
Yeah.
Although I've just read that Robert Hardy has just left us, hasn't he? What a wonderful actor. In a play that he was, just read it, and I think it was a paper a couple of days ago, when a woman down the front was doing a lot of rustling. It was a serious play. He actually walked straight to the front and said, "Will you please stop that?" and held the look at her for a couple of seconds, And there was this like deathly silence.
Yeah.
And then he turned around and carried on as if nothing had happened in the play.
Yeah.
Just dropped straight back into the role.
But
that takes courage.
You're going to say it takes courage, and also you have to really be sure that the woman's not going to have a go back.
Absolutely.
Because you're like, well, listen, finally we've got to wrap up. I could talk to you all day about it, but we've got to wrap up. This album of yours has been beautifully received. I have to say, everything about it's really well packaged as well. There's this lovely booklet inside telling your story. Have you ever put a book out, though, Mark, yourself? Have you ever thought about a book?
People, it has been mentioned to me, not by a publisher, but by a couple of people said, Mark, why don't you write your autobiography?
You should, yeah.
I said, well, I don't know. Is it? I know where the bodies are buried.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think I loved your story. Just the fact, as we were saying right at the beginning, I love your innocence of the fact that you clearly love the business. It's lovely, as I say, to meet you, and I can see that you enjoy what you're doing. And I think when you've been lucky enough to start it so young, and work with all of these people, as you say, like, Val Parnell and Arthur Askey and all these greats. Now your recollections, it's like anybody's. When you look back and you think, oh yeah, I did meet that person, but your memory changes.
Yeah,
because when you're young, you think, oh,
I must say, that's another great thing about that sort of life of variety, pantomimes, whatever, and going into the theatre and musicals and plays now, having done a lot of plays, it's almost, they give you benchmarks for the years of your life.
Yes.
Because when people say to me, oh yeah, 1966, I can immediately remember what I was doing that year. And right back to the beginning, from 1960. I mean, I could go through every year, which would take a while, and I could tell you probably most of what I did every year. Wow. So you have this kind of chronological chaptering in your mind of your career, which goes before you like a series of slides. It's marvellous, really. It is quite something.
But if you don't document it, this is what I always say to people as well. I remember interviewing Ken Dodd, who I think is another genius.
Oh,
comic.
I met him 2 years ago at the Queen's Garden Party.
Yeah, and
what
he's
a guy,
such a lovely man.
I did some Sunday concerts with him as well.
He's so funny, just naturally a funny guy, though,
Marvellous.
isn't he? But I said to him, if you don't put the book down, what you get is people writing books about you.
Yeah.
And as he said, well, there are a couple who've written about him who there's so many incorrect bits, and he said he'd love to correct it, but he thinks, should he? And then I said, yes, but only you know the true story. So
well, this is true. I've just finished reading Freddie Davis. Remember Parrot Face?
Oh, yeah, I loved him.
Him. Called Funny Bones.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you've worked with him because
I have.
He's fascinating when you've worked with him. I think,
absolutely fascinating. I said, and I saw him recently when I was at Harrogate, and he came to see the show with his partner Lisa. And we discussed it. I said, I can put your book down, Freddie. It was just marvellous to hear his beginnings through being a Butlins redcoat and all that. I know that sounds like an old story, lots of people did, but there are lots of things in his personal life that happened that were rather tragic.
Yeah.
His young brother drowned when he was very, very young, and that's why they moved up north, because actually he came from the south originally. But his book was fascinating, how he was inspired by a distant family relative who was a comic.
Yeah.
That nobody knew much about, but he kind of rediscovered him.
And I think the key of what I've read the same book, and I think the thing, and it goes back to the essence of show business, he kept reinventing himself.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, funny is funny, and he's a funny man.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, there was a period when he was working as an entertainment officer in,
that's right, in
either
America.
a boat or something like
he
that.
Was in Miami. Yeah.
And I was thinking, how did you end up from that to that? And, but really, the funny comes back, and people discover him, and then became a big film star, didn't he?
Yeah,
later
Funny Bones. Yeah.
Very clever guy.
Yeah, well, whether I write the book or not, who knows? But I sometimes feel. I've read some that were real page turners.
Yeah.
Michael Caine's first book was marvellous, and also the first book of Alec Guinness, Blessings in Disguise.
Oh yeah.
Couldn't put it down. Wonderful. But I think sometimes with autobiographies, especially if you've known the people, and I've known some of the people that they've written their autobiography, and I've thought to myself, they're not telling the whole story here.
Yeah.
Because there are certain things that, if you're writing an autobiography, I suppose you leave out. If you decide to do a warts and all, it can actually be a bit too revealing and uncover things about people you've worked with who might not want those things uncovered.
There's always, I think it's kind of best to do a book like a jottings of your life. So it's people you've worked with. Mainly move the things about yourself out, because I always believe it's a bit like when I'm sure you've gone through this, when you've met wonderful people, and you want them to be what you want them to be, you know, like Tony Curtis or whatever. You do. Please be nice, you know, because I just love you. So it's a bit of that. And when they are, it's a bonus. And I don't want to know about the problems he had and all that. He's just a brilliant actor. So
yeah, I loved it. I loved him. Yeah, but it's just whether you reveal your inner thoughts or not. Yeah. And sometimes your inner thoughts might be very interesting to a reading public, but on the other hand, I always believe there's a certain mystery. I mean, I admire people that can keep themselves really self-contained. I mean, I know it became a bit of a thing of Bob Dylan's to be, you know, a little bit unusual and secretive and arrive in Great Britain holding a great light bulb. What the hell did that mean? You know?
But you've remembered it.
But I remembered it, and all those things. And I'm a fan of Bob Dylan. I think he's a brilliant lyricist, particularly. But yeah, it's whether you want, like some other people you never read anything about, do you? Like Gene Hackman, the actor. Yeah,
but you know, you feel you know a lot about him.
I don't ever know anything about him personally, but I just love him as an actor, and I think it's admirable if they can get away with being that concealed about themselves when they're at a high spot in the media, when they've got a high profile. How can you do that? Because I'm sure they're inundated, or they have been, by people who want to interview them, talk to them, discuss this and that and the other with them. I mean, I don't read Playboy anymore. Sometimes you got some revealing nice interviews in Playboy years ago.
I'm sure you don't remember those, Mark.
Yeah, I do. But yeah, so it depends whether you want to be that revealing about yourself as well as people you've worked with, really, I suppose.
It's been lovely to talk to you. You've got to come back. We could do far much more with you. But you're back on tour, I think, in October. Is it October?
Yeah, October 10th.
Yeah, and you're with the
Buxton, kick-off in Buxton for a 28-date tour with Marty and Eden Kane and Mike Berry and the Wildcats. Yeah.
Wow. So
28 days.
Is it a big party backstage, or are you all passing around vitamin tablets?
No. I think Marty talks about taking tablets. And says about his wife giving him the wrong one for the wrong day, just as he's going out the door. Hang on, I think I've given you Tuesdays. It's only Monday. But yeah, it was great fun. I must say, it was great. It was a full circle, really, isn't it, for me? Because, as I say, it was only that I went to see a show of Marty and the Boys 3 years before last year, and Derek Nichol, the promoter, was there. Yeah. And he said, "Have you ever thought about doing one of these tours, Mark?" And I hadn't. I'd never done a Silver Sixties or anything. Yeah. I hadn't been on tour since, as I say, since '64, because I'd been lucky enough to be in musicals and plays and so on, and working in all over the world as well as Great Britain. And I said, yeah. So we started talking about it, and I did it last year, and it was hugely enjoyable. And I
love the way all the girls still scream. Isn't it great?
Yeah,
it's brilliant though, isn't it? You know, because all the years just peel off them. It's
and you do get a lot of younger people as well, whose parents and
they're bringing their kids
have introduced them. You know,
I think that's the greatness of the music. It goes back to your album. It is great because they bring their children. Sometimes you see little grandchildren there, but they're just enjoying the atmosphere of a good fun. I describe it as a great fun pop party.
Yeah, it was great fun. It really was. And being the new boy on the block, by the end of last year's tour, as I used to say near the end, that the boys in the band have now accepted, which is great. And they let me, when we go back to the hotel, they let me join in their games. Happy Families and Snap.
Listen, Mark Wynter, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much today for being my guest. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Neil, very much indeed.